Chapter 206. You are crazy. You are really crazy. Tima's mouth twisted. How could you say such a thing? Did you go crazy from the pain? He violently shook his head. He apparently couldn't accept the fact that his entire career as a healer had just lost to Raon's face. Head of house, are you really going to let them do that? It's plain to see that they are going to die. You have to stop them. Tima shouted. His voice showed clear anger, rather than worry for the patient. Ha! Raon snickered while looking at Tima's. He got so angry from getting his face compared to mine. Since composure was one of Tima's strong points, he had never seen him get so angry before, not even in his previous life. Getting his face compared to Raon's must have seriously crushed his pride. This is getting interesting. It was impossible to blow his cover because he had too much reputation behind him, but Raon figured there was a lot to gain from the situation. Head of house. Tima's called out to Michelle once again to urge her. That's. Michelle bit her lip in consideration. She apparently wasn't sure who to trust between Raon and Tima's. Unlike your daughter, I'm sure you aren't going to decide just from looking at the face, are you? The head of house was the one who called me here in the first place. The face isn't all I've got. I'm rather confident in my swordsmanship and medicine. Raon smiled brilliantly at Tima's, who was scowling. I wasn't talking to you. As soon as Raon mentioned his face, Tima's started glaring even more fiercely. Head of house, I've healed countless people so far, regardless of their country and house. I can proudly announce that I've never lied before concerning the patient and treatment. Woof woof. It was Dog's hit. He used his noble image and his medicine to kill countless people and turn them into his slaves. He was indeed Darius's confidant, since he was capable of lying without flinching. If your daughter moves right now, there's bound to be a danger on the way. Moreover, Retran is currently at war, and there's no guarantee that the saint will properly treat her even if they manage to arrive there. Tima's appealed with teary eyes, as if he really were worried about Enchia. Although I'm still lacking as a healer, I've got way more experience and put in a lot more effort than him. You are definitely going to regret it if you trust him just because he was lucky enough to find the cause. Although he was trying to convince her politely, he was pretty much threatening her by saying that Enchia was going to die if she didn't listen to him. Was your name Raon? Raon nodded without responding. Another tendon popped on Tima's forehead. You said earlier that the heat source was located around the patient's head, didn't you? Indeed. Why do you think the other healers didn't manage to find it? Because they were less competent than you? No. It's because they were careful in their examination, since a small mistake in her head could cause the death of the patient. Tima's lowered his eyebrows and continued. You were lucky this time, but if you keep searching through the patient's mana circuit with your immature skills, you will end up killing your patient or disabling them. If you want to call yourself a healer, you should stop taking care of your face and learn how dangerous it is to deal with the head. 108. What? There are 108 places that can endanger you if an aura touches them. Raon nonchalantly spoke with his arms crossed. But how did you? Tima's jaw dropped, unable to believe Raon knew that. He even knows such a thing? Was he really the saint's student? Wow. The other swordsman also looked up at Raon, who managed to unsettle Tima's. It would be strange if I didn't know that. Raon snickered, enjoying Tima's astonishment. Because you told me about that. What occupation needed as much knowledge of a human body as a doctor? It's that of an assassin. You needed to know better than anyone else which parts you needed to hit to kill or disable your opponent in order to become a fully fledged assassin. And I needed to learn it even more thoroughly because Darius was a perfectionist. Since he often needed to disguise the deaths of his enemies and allies for his plans, he periodically received lessons from Tima's about weaknesses and vital points in the human body. The knowledge he learned from Tima's was extremely helpful this time as well, when he examined Enchia's head. Let me add one more thing. Raon raised his finger to point at his face. I don't really take care of my face. I was just born with this face. You? Why are you talking back to me like that? Tima's glared fiercely at Raon. Because that's how you've been talking to me. What? I already gave you enough respect. I've been answering your questions honestly and politely. Raon smiled coldly and tilted his chin. But you were simply disrespectful towards me even though you didn't even know what position I have in Sieghart, nor what I represent. Do I have any reason to remain polite to someone who has no manners? Arg. Tima's cheeks trembled. His face turned so red that he was now comparable to Enshia's skin. Wow, he even looks handsome when he's making fun of him. Enshia exclaimed while staring at Raon with her hands gathered. Tima's looked even more angry because of Enshia's interjection. Do you even realize who Sir Tima's is to behave like that? The young man next to Tima's stepped up with a frown. He's a saint that bestowed his benevolence on countless people in the continent without even receiving any rewards. He's on a different level as a doctor, especially compared to you. Are you telling me that manners are unnecessary just because he's on a different level? But his experience. His experience, I see. Raon smiled coldly. Do you remember who taught me medicine? The ragged saint in Sieghart's Sword of Light. I don't think my standing is that different from his, since I was taught from those two. That's... The young man who seemed to be Tima's disciple fell speechless. You should stay back. Tima's came up with a frown. It was my mistake. I was too flustered and forgot I needed to keep my manners towards you. I apologize. He said it with a voice full of respect as he bowed. In that case, I apologize as well. A smile appeared on Raon's face while his head was lowered. It hit the mark. Tima's hadn't calmed down. His head only cooled down because he wanted to kill him too much. He was definitely going to come to personally kill him during the mission, or at another time. Head of house, please make your decision. Tima's turned his head towards Michelle. My opinion hasn't changed. It's extremely dangerous to send your daughter to Retran, since it's pretty much certain that she is going to die. If you leave her to me, I'll do my best to treat her within a year. He even gave a 1-year time limit, unlike before. I'll also tell this to you for the last time. I can definitely treat her once we meet the saint at Retran. Since the Heavenly Division leader is going to lead the group, no one is going to be able to lay a finger on Lady Enchia, regardless of who they are. Raon declared that he could definitely treat her without any hesitation in his voice. The Heavenly Blade leader also nodded confidently. Heavenly Blade leader. Tima's expression distorted in an indescribable manner as he bit his lip. He apparently didn't notice the Heavenly Blade leader before. Ha! Michelle sighed deeply between them, since she couldn't decide. She was well known for her bold personality, but she was apparently too worried when it came down to her youngest daughter's health. Mom! Enchia raised her hand. My opinion hasn't changed. I want to go with Sir Raon. Seriously, you. Choosing Sir Tima's wouldn't be a bad idea, but I think Sir Raon is going to make me recover faster. How do you know that? Because he's handsome. Her argument was his face once again. There's no way someone as handsome as him would lie. Enchia. His face is my medicine and my treatment. I don't feel any pain as long as I'm watching him. Ah. Michelle sighed, frowning while grabbing her temple. After clutching her head for a while, she slowly raised her head. The hesitation had disappeared from her eyes, which used to waver. I'm sorry, Sir Tima's. She bowed at Tima's. It is said that no parent ever persuaded a determined child to do otherwise. I would like to grant her wish. Tima's nodded silently after looking at Michelle, Enchia, Raon, and Cheryl. I see. The patient and her guardian's decision is the most important. He smiled gently and lowered his raised sleeve. That bastard. Raon narrowed his eyes. He made up his mind. Judging from his expression and voice, Tima's already decided that he would kill Raon. It was obvious that he would kill Enchia as well after taking full advantage of her symptoms. I'll pay the treatment fee that I promised. No, I couldn't treat her, and I never planned to take fees to begin with. He shook his hand with a smile. And as for you, please excuse my rudeness. I was just too agitated. It's okay. I understand. He managed to appease his anger and behave so calmly in that situation. He was indeed an extraordinary person. I'll be taking my leave now. I'll be hoping for your complete recovery from afar. Timas left Enchia's room alongside his disciple, as if he didn't care anymore. General Administrator, please see Sir Timas off. You understood. You understood. The General Administrator, who couldn't keep up with the situation, hurriedly ran after Timas. I wonder if I made the correct decision. Michelle sighed deeply. I'll make sure you won't regret it. It wasn't just a correct decision, but she had pretty much taken the hand of a savior. If she chose Timas, the entire house would have been taken over by Robert. The way he guarantees is also super handsome. Enchia's eyes were sparkling as she exclaimed. Then, when our leave? Ack! As Michelle was about to discuss their departure, Enchia groaned and collapsed on the bed. Enchia! Raon immediately went to Enchia, inserting Glacier's coldness into her mana circuit. I just need to scare it off. If he attacked the Hellworm, it would most likely bring pain to Enchia. He used his coldness to scare it off, instead of moving quickly like before. Whir! He slowly followed Enchia's mana circuit upwards while pushing away the heat with Glacier's coldness, and the Hellworm's presence disappeared. In turn, the heat spreading throughout Enchia's body subsided. Wow! Enchia's lips parted after she tried clenching her fist. It doesn't even hurt, and I feel even better than before. She smiled while being surprised at the same time as she looked at the relieved swelling in her arm. I should continue like this. He estimated that he just needed to scare the Hellworm off to make it hide for Enchia to last until they reached Retran. It's a relief. Michelle nodded while grabbing Enchia's hand. Then, when are you going to leave? Are you going to leave right now? No. I'm planning to leave tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Yes. We have some preparations to make. Is that okay, Division Leader? Yes. Cheryl nodded, showing her agreement. Then, how many people from our side can you bring with you? Since we need to move as quickly as possible, I'm only planning to bring Lady Enchia. What? But she can't do anything by herself. Michelle shook her hand, telling him it was impossible. Since we have female swordsmen with us, you don't need to worry. But at least one person. It would be a bother. Raon stood firm, giving additional instruction to Michelle through an aura message. Head of house, please make every maid leave the room right now, as naturally as possible. Michelle flinched for a moment, but she nodded imperceptibly once she understood his message. Then, we need to quickly prepare. You girls should go check the carriage and prepare the food and necessities for the swordsman. Yes. Understood. The maids inside the room nodded, then left the room. Whir. As soon as the door closed, Raon created an energy barrier to stop the sound from going out. What's the matter? We need to catch the culprit. See culprit? The energy inside Lady Enchia's head isn't a natural symptom or disease, but an artificial phenomenon. Which means somebody was targeting Lady Enchia. Ah. Enchia and Michelle's lips started to tremble upon hearing that. Had you ever been injured outside before your fingers started to hurt? And no, I hadn't. I've always just worked in my workshop. Which means someone inside the house did it. Raon declared with certainty. Are you sure? Cheryl came up to him with a frown. You have to be careful about this kind of matter. I'm sure. I don't know who did this, but this is definitely unnatural. He wouldn't have been so sure if Timas hadn't come to visit, but he could ascertain it after he saw Tima's reaction. There must have been a house Robert spy among them. There's no way. Everyone I met in the workshop was my trustworthy family. Michelle and Enchia shook their heads. It looked like they didn't want to believe it. If you don't want to find the culprit, then I'll withdraw. It's not our mission, nor is it our house's business. However, this is your only chance if you want to find the culprit. Raon declared it was their last chance, then closed his eyes. He was telling them he didn't mind if they refused. See, can you really find them? Michelle swallowed nervously. Since I've set a trap, they are bound to step on it. A trap? Cheryl also stepped towards him in curiosity. The culprit must have made Lady Inchia fall in that state with an objective in mind. There must have been something to gain from her sickness. Although he already knew that it was Robert's plan to take over the house, he unfortunately couldn't tell them about it. Since I showed them I could appease Lady Inchia's condition, and said that I would leave with her tomorrow, the culprit must be impatient right now. After all, if she gets treated instead of staying sick, whatever plan is will be foiled. Then, before Inchia leaves. Indeed. They will try to worsen her condition so that she won't be able to leave. Raon nodded. Since he said he would leave the next day, and wouldn't bring anyone from House Yonan, that night was the only opportunity for them to worsen her condition. Which means there's an extremely high possibility that they will visit Lady Inchia tonight. Ah, so that was why you asked me to make them leave in a natural manner. Michelle's jaw dropped upon realizing the meaning of Raon's aura message. How long have you been thinking about that? From the beginning. You are crazy. Cheryl narrowed her eyes as she looked into Raon's eyes. How can someone like him exist? Medicinal knowledge surpassing Tima's, and the ability to predict the existence of a culprit and immediately lay out a trap wasn't something even she was capable of. How the hell did he grow up? Might, planning, knowledge, composure, and even his face. She was speechless to learn that a 17-year-old swordsman could be perfect in every aspect. Huh? Did he really think about that from the beginning? Our vice squad leader is so scary. I know, right? The Light Wind and Heavenly Blade were also dumbfounded as they looked at Raon. Then, what shall we do now? We can't just leave Inchia like this. Michelle impatiently bit her fingernail. Of course we can't. Raon nodded. That's why we need something. Something? Yes. I heard that Yonan possesses that artifact. Boom. Explosions occurred one after another around the forest on the outskirts of Dembel City. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. Timas crushed everything in sight by continuously shooting his aura around him, regardless of the forest being destroyed. TSSH. The trees and grass didn't simply get destroyed, they turned into black ash and melted down. Raon Zighart. The rage from getting thoroughly defeated by Raon at House Yonan seemed to have exploded, turning his eyes completely red. I'll kill you. I'll melt your face alive. I'll make sure you won't have an easy death. Timas screamed like a monster, spreading enough aura around him to crush the entire forest. Tima's disciple, Yufan, could only bite his lip in fear while staying far back. I need to stay further out. When Yufan was about to step back, a crow with white eyes surged from his shadow. Caw! The crow sat on his shoulder, then opened its sharp beak to spit out a black piece of paper. This. Yufan's eyes widened after reading the paper's contents. Master. We are in trouble. Yufan ran towards Timas, who was still destroying the forest, with the paper in his hand. They are going to leave tomorrow, without bringing a single maid or servant. What? Focus returned to Timas's eyes upon hearing that. Why? It's apparently in order to move as fast as possible, since there are female swordsmen among Zighart people. Those damn bastards keep doing that. Timas ground his teeth. He only pretended to not care anymore because he had spies in House Yonan, but it had become more problematic. What should we do? Tell them to increase the Hellworm's activity to 80% tonight. Isn't 80% going to be dangerous? She will feel pain worse than death itself, but she should survive. Since we need to delay their departure, that's the minimum we need. Delay their departure? Yufan tilted his head. He couldn't understand why he would delay them instead of just preventing it. I won't get the opportunity to kill that damn bastard if they can't depart at all. What? But they have the Heavenly Blade leader on their side. I'm going to call the shadows. Even the shadows are unable to stop the Heavenly Blade leader. I'm not planning on killing her. I'm only targeting Raon Zighart, no one else. I'm going to use shadows to stop the Heavenly Blade leader and insert the ash poison in him. They will have to leave if he ends up dying. He clenched his fist, determined to kill him. Raon, I'm going to kill that arrogant bastard. I'm definitely going to melt down all his skin and watch him suffer. You understood. I'll make preparations for that. One more thing. Yufan nodded, and when he was about to write the message to convey it through the crow, Timas raised his hand. Send an assassin to that madman in Retran. Timas ground his teeth. We need the power of House Yonin for our future plan. We can't let Sieghart or the Saint help them. During the dim night where the moon was hiding behind dark clouds, the pink door located at the deepest part of the 9th floor of House Yonin silently opened, and a black shape entered the room. The black shape seemed familiar with the room as it went to the center, where the bed was located. Enchia was sleeping there, drenched in a cold sweat because of the pain. My lady. Although her name was called, Enchia only groaned without waking up. Her skin had turned even more red than usual because of the intense heat. Rustle. The shape took out a small piece of cloth. It took out the red needle that was wrapped inside and pressed it to the middle of Enchia's forehead. Ha! Ha! However, the needle was unable to penetrate Enchia's skin. The tip bent as if it had just stabbed a rock. How is this posse? Gasp! Just as it was about to remove the needle, Enchia opened her eyes. It was you. Instead of blue eyes similar to an ocean, crimson eyes that sparked in a frightening manner and seemed to bring death appeared. Chapter 207. And no. Coup. Enchia grabbed the black shape by its neck and threw it to the ground before it could speak. Slam. The black shape coughed out blood, and Enchia's room trembled. The monstrous strength couldn't possibly come from someone who was bedridden for over a year. My lady, just how? Shut your mouth. While Enchia was suppressing the black shape with a cold smile, the door opened up and Cheryl entered alongside the swordsman and turned the light on. Ha! It was true. It happened exactly the way Sir Raon predicted. The swordsmen dropped their jaws upon seeing the young woman in a maid outfit under Enchia. That woman is the maid that has been staying right next to Lady Enchia all this time. Yes, she's the person who has been assisting her all along. Martha growled, and Bayan frowned. Enchia was the last person to enter, supported by Michelle. Her lips were trembling as she spotted the maid on the ground. Loren, was it you? Enchia's sky-blue eyes teared up. It looked like rain was going to fall soon. Why did you do this? Why are there two ladies? The maid named Lauren's eyes widened, looking back and forth between the blue-eyed Enchia in front of her and the red-eyed Enchia who was suppressing her. I'm sorry, but I'm not your lady. The red-eyed Enchia tapped on his face. The gray mantle fell from his shoulders and Raon's face was revealed. Doppelganger's mantle. Loren swallowed nervously when she saw the mantle on the ground. It looked like she finally realized what was going on. I was pretending a little, since I figured you would be here. Raon grabbed the doppelganger's mantle and snickered. That mantle was a legendary artifact, capable of changing someone's appearance into that of another's. There were multiple drawbacks, but it was certainly effective. Loren. Why did you? Enchia and Michelle's eyes were trembling like boats facing a tidal wave. It looked like they didn't want to believe the situation. On the other hand, Raon calmly looked down on Loren as if it were a natural course of action. It was obvious. Since the hell worm needed to be directly inserted through the mouth or nose, the spy was bound to be someone close to Enchia. He figured it must have been one of Enchia's two maids, and House Robert's spy ended up being Loren, who had been assisting Enchia all along. How could you do this to me when we've been together since I was 8? Enchia sank to the ground while covering her mouth. 8 years old. House Robert made children start their assassination or spying activities between the age of 6 and 8. Hearing that age made him even more certain. Though, I'm sure she doesn't even know who she is working for. Dara's spies are sporadically networked, and he doesn't even tell them what their real affiliation is. The spies only obey orders, since they are brainwashed to do so. Sir Raon, was it Loren's doing? Did Loren really do that? Enchia's lips parted after a long time. The way her dry lips were trembling almost looked pitiful. She is the spy. No. I didn't do anything. Loren forcibly shook her head. What are you saying after you tried to stab this needle into the middle of my forehead? Raon showed Loren the crooked needle on the ground. That's medicine.
Loren screamed, veins showing in her eyes.
Medicine?
Enchia bit her lips while looking at the needle.
It looked like she was pinning her last hope on the words. Do you remember the competent pharmacist who visited us a few months ago? This is a medicine I got from him, it lowers the heat. Then why did you smear that on a needle and try to stab me with it in the middle of the night?
I was only following the pharmacist's instructions. He said that an extremely weak stab of this needle smeared with medicine during my lady's sleep would reduce the heat.
Loren continued to lie without even blinking.
I injected the medicine from time to time whenever my lady was in too much pain.
I only did that for my lady's sake. Sniff.
She lowered her teary face. Her acting was good enough to make unrelated people believe her words.
Is that so? Enchia's eyes were trembling violently. She was shaken by her nonsensical excuses. I guess it can't be helped.
That was the scariest part about a long-term spy. They would give some unreasonable excuses, and that was enough to cloud their victim's judgment because of the long time they'd spent together. Moreover, since Enchia said she grew up together with her ever since she was 8, she must have wanted to believe her even more.
However,
while that could work against Enchia and Michelle, it didn't work against him, since he was a stranger. But if your stab was extremely weak as you said, then the needle wouldn't have been crooked like this.
You were obviously going for a deep stab and failed. Raon pointed at the tip of the bent needle.
Moreover, we will be able to tell if it's really a medicine or a poison once we investigate the smeared medicine.
And no, it's a misunderstanding.
Loren was rolling her eyes so quickly in order to find a new excuse, to the point where it was scary.
Loren.
Enchia forced herself to clench her fist.
She was biting her lip in pain. I was really just worried about my lad. Coo. Raon dislocated Loren's chin in the middle of her speech. Since it looks like you've accepted it to a certain extent, I think I can show you the real proof. Proof? Spies hide poison in their mouths, since they never know when their identities might be discovered. That's not the case for her. We checked it before Loren joined us. Michelle shook her head, saying that it couldn't be true. It's because she didn't have the poison back then. What?
At first, they do their work properly, as if they were really part of the house.
At that point, they don't steal information.
They only get their missions as a spy and the poison in their teeth after they gain enough trust from the people inside the house while acting as an ordinary child.
Robert's method took advantage of people's affection and psychology. You will know once you see. MHH. Raon put his hand inside Loren's mouth and took out a white bead that was hidden in her molar.
Despite its color, it was a nasty poison that could melt her intestines and kill her the moment she bit it.
Loren looked up at Raon with scared eyes.
She was apparently surprised by his knowledge that had allowed him to predict her visit and find the poison inside her mouth in an instant.
Don't be surprised. Raon smiled bitterly. I only know all of this because I've experienced it in the past.
That poison bead was always stuck between his teeth when he used to live as an assassin. He was only aware of that fact because he used to live like a slave who could be forced to die at any time, just like her.
Loren. Strength left Enchia's arms.
Apparently, she even lost the strength to be angry at her.
Why did you do that?
Just why?
My lady. Please listen, Coo.
Loren tried to give excuses despite having her chin dislocated, but Raon sent a shock to her heart to make her faint. It was a measure taken in order to take care of the rageworm that might exist in her heart.
General Administrator Arun.
Raon called Arun, who was frowning from behind them, since he was the only person in his right mind.
Yes. We should imprison her for now. All right. Arun hurriedly nodded, then took Loren outside. Raon looked at the collapsed Enchia.
The intense trembling of her eyes was slowly stabilizing.
She must have accepted reality.
The reason he went through all that work despite the fact that he could have just neutralized and removed the poison from Loren from the beginning was to make sure Enchia and Michelle wouldn't have any regrets. Although she was immensely shocked, she fortunately looked like she had accepted the reality of it all. There's no point in interrogating Loren. The spies worked as discrete groups, unlike the assassins. Since the spies usually had to go through at least 4 to 5 contacts to reach Darius or Timas, there was no way she would reveal their names or the treatment method for Enchia. We are going to leave in the morning in 2 days instead of tomorrow, so please rest well.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Raon. Accepting Michelle and Enchia's weak thanks, Raon went outside. Raon.
Cheryl's voice called out to him when he was about to return to his lodgings. He turned around to look, and the heavenly blade and the light wind were staring at him with dumbfounded expressions.
What the hell are you? Cheryl walked up to him with a frown.
He didn't just create a situation for the spy to act, but also completely understood the spy's identity and psychology. She allowed Raon's plan because it seemed realistic, but she never thought everything would be solved so easily.
What the hell is this guy? Great might?
She could understand it as a result of his natural talent and endless efforts. However, the trap in the plan he had devised that day was the sort that came from an extremely experienced person, and she couldn't believe he was just a novice swordsman on his second mission. It was more and more ridiculous, the more she thought about it.
I'm also curious about what you have in that small head of yours. Ekin also seemed unable to understand it as he laughed bitterly.
I already knew you were smart, but I didn't know you could do this.
Raon. Amazing. Handsome. Well, he's pretty smart, I guess.
Bayan gasped, Runan gave a thumbs up, and Martha slowly nodded.
I am a bit scared at this point. I know, right? He's almost like a ghost. Dorian and Krine's chins were trembling violently. I was just lucky.
Raon shrugged, facing the swordsman's surprised eyes.
Because I wasn't certain either. It looked like you were certain, though?
Raon just smiled at Cheryl, who was narrowing her eyes.
It looks like you have no intention of answering me. Anyway, good job.
We did manage to find the spy thanks to you. However, since the spies usually go through at least one connection, you can hardly obtain any information from them. You most likely won't get any information from her by interrogating her, so don't get your hopes up too much.
All right. Raon nodded in agreement.
I don't even know if I'm talking to a 17-year-old or a 71-year-old. Cheryl shook her hand in disgust and returned to Enchia's room. However, there was one fact she wasn't aware of.
We did gain something from this. And it was a huge gain. Darius Robert was a perfectionist.
He must have spent a lot of time and manpower in order to take over House Yonan, yet that plan had been foiled in an instant. He was bound to start rampaging like a madman now, blowing his cover as a gentleman.
My only regret is that I can't watch the shape he's going to take. Raon snickered, thinking about Darius Robert, who should have been in the south.
When Cheryl returned to the room, Enchia was already fast asleep, and Michelle was holding her hand. I'll guard her from now on, so the head of house should rest as well.
Cheryl went next to Enchia's bed and looked at Michelle. Thank you.
Michelle caught her breath and bowed. We are simply repaying our debt. Even then, you are being considerate of us in many ways, especially Sir Raon. As expected of the master of a house, she was aware of the fact that Raon was being considerate in many ways.
Who the hell is he? What do you mean?
The way he uses his head, his judgment, and decisiveness. He doesn't look like a young man in any of those aspects. Michelle shook her head, while looking at the ground where Raon had subdued Loren.
Is the destructive king of the north teaching him personally? That's not the case.
He does have a teacher, but he mostly grew up on his own.
And? Cheryl shook her head and looked back at the door. I'm also curious about his true abilities. Just what were the limits of his abilities? Timas was looking at the sun that was defeating the dim night from the forest.
His face was fiercely distorted, despite the dazzling sunlight.
Why is there no contact? Timas glared, smacking the big tree next to him. Slum.
Along with the sound of an earthquake, the tree fell down in a single hit and turned to ash before disappearing. She should have contacted us a long time ago.
Why is she not contacting us? I am not sure. The networking branch is just saying that there was no contact. Yufan lowered his head with trembling shoulders.
Are you sure you gave her proper instructions?
Yes. She should have gotten them before evening. That means she was found out. Timas stomped on the ground.
The grass around the black energy emerging from the ground was crumbling as if a drought had been going on for a long time.
That stupid bitch. How could she be found out when it was just a simple task of stabbing her with a needle? Tima's eyes were glowing maliciously, his anger returning to him after all his efforts at appeasing it. Then, I'm going to contact him right awa.
Coo.
Are you crazy? Crazy? As Yufan summoned a crow from his shadow, Timas grabbed his neck. We've been preparing to take over House Yonin for over 15 years now.
If he ends up learning about this, we'll both be beheaded.
Ah. Yufan's teeth chattered as he grabbed his own neck. Even if you want to make a report, you have to do it after getting results. It's not going to end well for us if you do it right now. Timas calmly took a deep breath to appease his erupting anger. But we can't hide it from him.
That's why we need to conclude this matter as soon as possible.
Where are the shadows right now? They are already nearby. They should be able to catch up to us, even if we leave tomorrow. Yufan responded quickly and lowered his head. Call everyone around us, including the shadows.
We don't need to chase them quickly. It's okay to be slow, so tell them to take every weapon and poison from the branch.
All of them? Our opponent is the Heavenly Division leader.
We need to use all the poisons and smokescreens in order to have any hope of stopping her for a moment.
Timas ground his teeth, thinking about the Heavenly Division leader he saw that day. It's impossible to kill her.
Although she seemed like a feather when she was hiding her presence, she became bigger than a mountain once she showed it on the outside.
Her prowess was even better than the rumors. Raon. Just make sure to kill Raon Zieghart. We can recover everything once that happens. Black energy was emerging from Tima's hand.
I'll tear his nice face off while he's alive.
Raon went to the head of house's office the next afternoon. The room was still a mess, but Michelle's expression was bright, unlike the day before. Welcome. Michelle's greeting was a lot more polite than the day before. Are you feeling better now? Raon asked, bowing in return.
I still feel suffocated, but I quickly recovered my senses thanks to Sir Raon showing me Lauren's true identity. The shock treatment must have been effective. She smiled awkwardly, saying that she could accept it now. The general administrator interrogated Lauren all night long, but nothing was gained.
He said she didn't seem to know anything. I see. It was as expected.
The only thing Lauren knew must have been how to contact the discreet group right above her. In the end, we need to send her to Retran in order to treat her.
You are leaving tomorrow, right?
Yes. Since we managed to catch the spy, I think it would be better to bring a maid to help Lady Inchia.
Yes, I'll get one prepared. And?
Raon interrupted himself, as if he were worried about something.
You can tell me without hesitation.
Michelle leaned forward, gesturing to him to tell her anything he had to say.
I think this journey to escort Lady Inchia isn't going to be an easy one. What do you mean?
Considering the way they were openly targeting Lady Inchia, there must be something they want from House Yonin. Those bastards were the Roberts. That's what he wanted to say, but he managed to suppress his urge. There's no way they would let this opportunity slip. I'm sure they are going to thoroughly prepare and attack us and Lady Inchia.
What shall we do then?
Since they are most likely going to use a strange power or poison just like they did to Lady Inchia, can the head of house help us a little?
Of course.
She opened her hands, saying that it was only natural for her to help.
Our family is famous for artifacts. Tell me anything you want. Great. Raon smiled faintly and took out a piece of paper from his inner pocket and gave it to her.
Evade poison artifact, ventilator, radiating stone, strength enhancement artifact, night vision artifact, agility enhancement, blazing brazier, wind gem. Her voice trembled more and more as she read out aloud the endless list one by one.
Are you sure you need all of those?
Yes. Yes. The evade poison artifact is especially important. Cure poison was capable of healing the poison, but the evade poison could actively negate the poison. That was why the evade poison artifact was far better and more expensive than the cure poison artifact.
I can see some unnecessary items on the list. We need all of them in order to return with everyone alive. What nonsense are you spouting?
Wrath popped up on the bracelet, then started shouting at his nonsense. That might be the case for the evade poison artifact, but you don't need the strength enhancement or agility enhancement artifact.
Those are mine. That's why I'm saying you are scamming her right now. Not at all.
Raon calmly shook his head. Our chance of survival becomes higher if I become stronger to protect everyone.
I didn't lie at all.
Coup. Wrath glared at Michelle, unable to refute that strange argument, which was unreasonable and reasonable at the same time.
Hey, woman.
You should never give them to him.
This bastard is an evil demon, even worse than greed.
However, Michelle seemed to have made up her mind already despite Wrath's wish.
Everyone's safe return.
She murmured what he said about returning with everyone alive, then nodded.
Yes, I can trust him.
They only managed to find the spy because of Raon's plan, without being affected by their affection for Loren. She could trust him at that point, regardless of what he said.
All right, we will have them prepared by tomorrow. Michelle nodded. Cool. Wrath narrowed his eyes while looking at Michelle. How could you grant all of those wishes? Do you have too much money or something? Why does everyone crave to do everything for him?
Coldness was emanating from him in his displeasure. If Enchia completely recovers and everyone returns safely just like you said, I'll grant all of your wishes. Michelle spoke, her hands gathered together to show her sincerity.
And no. Wrath's eyes widened. He is really going to say all of his wishes. Are you serious?
Raon smiled faintly, pushing away Wrath, who was violently shaking his hand.
Yes, I promise on my name. Make sure to remember that. Raon stood up with a smile on his face.
There's no reason for me to refuse if she's willing to give me what I want. He was confident he could extort so much from her that she would feel like the list she saw just then was generous. He could guarantee that Michelle would regret what she just promised.
I'm going nuts. Wrath violently shook his head. Why are all the doormats coming to you of their own accord?
You must teach the King of Essence how to attract those doormats.
I wonder. Raon snickered while watching Wrath flounder. It's probably because the King of Doormats is right next to me.
He was attracting other doormats on top of giving him everything he had. The giving Wrath was the best in the world.
Once Raon returned from visiting Michelle, Runan was preparing herself to go outside. Where are you going?
There was a beet ice cream shop. She murmured that she needed to go there at all costs because there was a new product.
Raon. Wrath slowly climbed up his forearm. How about going there as well? Why should I? Ice cream is delicious. It makes you feel better if you eat it. Not for me. Raon shook his head.
It was delicious, but training was better at making him feel good.
You crazy training addict. Is that all you had to say? Wait, then how about this? What?
The King of Essence will help you as long as I don't have to use Wrath.
Help? Yes, like checking other people's cards in the casino or telling you when other people are approaching. Wrath was desperately rolling his eyes. It looked like he wanted to eat the ice cream at all costs. I can now use him for free. Since they were going to leave the next day, he was planning to go out with Renan anyway. He could only laugh at getting an additional benefit like that. All right. Raon nodded, then went to Runan. Let's go together. MHM. MHM.
Runan nodded, her lips curving up into a small smile.
We came at the wrong time. Indeed.
As Raon clicked his tongue, the main gate of Halcyonen opened up and they could see a silver-haired man walking through it.
Ah!
Runan stepped back with trembling lips as she saw him.
I heard you came here, and it was true. The silver-haired man, Syria Sullian, waved his hand while smiling. Runan, it's been a long time. Yes, it's been a long time. Raon stepped up in front of Runan and smiled coldly. Raon Zighart. A small crack appeared in Syria Sullian's refreshing smile. Chapter 208. Raon narrowed his eyes while looking at Syria Sullian. It looks like he is still a psychopath. Just like last time, his eyes weren't moving even though his mouth was smiling. Other people would call it a brilliant smile, but he could only see it as a grotesque face, since he was aware of his true nature. The timing isn't good. Indeed. He only managed to notice Syria's approach after the gate opened because he didn't have his aura perception expanded. Though, it was also because his presence was completely concealed. You. He could hear Runan's groan from behind him. She managed to overcome her fear of blood, but it seemed it was still difficult for her to face Syria, who was the source of that trauma. What brings you here? He took a step forward in order to hide Runan from Syria's gaze. I was passing by Dembel City because of a mission, and I heard Zieghart's swordsman had entered House Yonan. I came here just in case, since they said there was a beautiful silver-haired girl among the swordsmen. Syria smiled, throwing a glance at Runan over Raon's shoulder. Just in case? Raon tilted his chin and snickered. It looks like you were certain she would be here, though. Syria was carrying a beet ice cream box in his left hand. If he really hadn't been sure, he wouldn't have been carrying that. Just like before, you still don't believe what people say. I do believe what people say. But you are a monster, not a person. Since Syria was famous for traveling throughout the continent to accomplish missions and practice his swordsmanship, his visit could truly be a coincidence. However, considering his expression and the atmosphere around him, he could ascertain that he'd been keeping track of Runan's movements. Runan. Are you not even going to greet me when you are seeing your big brother for the first time in such a long time? Syria raised the ice cream box he was holding. I even brought the beet ice cream you like. Ugh. Runan didn't raise her head even after he mentioned the ice cream. And that condition of hers was the better version, since she previously couldn't even show her fear in front of him. Are you sick? I need to examine you. Please stop. This is Yonan's domain. As Syria was about to enter, the warriors of House Yonan stopped him. Reveal your identity, and the objective of your visit. My name is Syria Sullian. I'm that girl's big brother. Can I enter for a moment? My sister looks like she's not doing too well. Syria pointed at Runan behind Raon. Syria Sullian? The azure sword of 12 stars of the continent. The warriors from House Yonan, who were guarding the door, hurriedly made a path for him upon learning Syria's identity. Since he was a famous person with a kind appearance, they had to let him enter once he mentioned his sister being there. Your big brother's going to check your conditio. Please step back. Raon extended his right hand to stop Syria's approach. What are you trying right now? Syria lowered his eyebrows while maintaining his smile. The gentle energy emanating from him sharpened like a fierce blade. The energy wave felt like sharp needles were piercing Raon's skin. Jokes shouldn't be taken too far, Raon Zighart. He rolled up the corners of his mouth, then took another step forward. Who do you think you are to stop me? I'm stopping you because Runan doesn't want it. Runan didn't say anything, though? I can tell without her saying anything. You must be delusional. I'm Runan's big brother, and you are just a stranger. You have no right to stop me. Syria shook his hand, gesturing to him to step back. An enormous wave of aura emerged from him and started to push him away. What a frightening amount of power. The 12 stars of the continent were the strongest among the young warriors, and he didn't have that title for no reason. The energy wave pressing upon him was on a different level from the 7th apostle and Garen. However, he couldn't afford to withdraw. Right? Raon overcame Syria's pressure, straightening his back. His tall stature didn't lose to Syria's anymore as he met his eyes. I have more than enough right. What do you mean? I'm Runan's direct superior, and we are currently on a mission. Even if you are her family,
you cannot meet her without my permission. He mentioned his position as the vice squad leader of Light Wind, and Syria stopped smiling.
He apparently didn't expect that argument.
Since it looks like your business is done now, please leave.
Raon shook his hand in the exact same way Syria did.
The energy wave emanating from him pushed Syria back in return, fluttering his clothes and hair like crazy. I heard Raon Sieghart's mouth was more dangerous than his sword, and it was true. Syria twisted his lips to create a smile. You've grown so much in only a few years.
I'm almost surprised.
His eyes turned black, as if they were staring into darkness. The pressure flowing from his elongated pupils was scary enough to make hair stand on end.
However, your arrogance has grown just as much. It's become far worse than before. Despite stating that he'd gotten more arrogant, his voice didn't sound angry or irritated.
It felt like his dry voice, devoid of all emotion, was crushing his heart. Raon frowned while looking at the warriors from House Yonan tilting their heads from behind Syria.
He's gotten stronger as well. That scary pressure was only targeting him. Befitting his reputation as the Azure Sword, Syria Sullian also became a lot stronger than before.
You are right.
It can't be helped if you are on a mission, but... Syria pointed at Runan, who was wearing casual clothes. It doesn't look like you are on a mission right now.
The fact that she's not wearing a uniform doesn't change the fact that we are on a mission.
What mission is it?
I have no reason to answer that question. Syria's pressure became bigger and bigger, but Raon didn't withdraw. He pressed the land with his feet while resonating the ring of fire. I really haven't seen Runan for a long time. I want to check whether my sister is healthy and uninjured, no matter what. I said this already, but you can't.
Isn't it strange to stop a big brother who is worried about his little sister to this extent? There must be a problem here.
Worried, huh?
Raon smiled coldly.
Syria's pupils stretched as he said he wanted to meet his sister.
Worry wasn't the emotion inside them, it was desire.
Raon had goosebumps from looking into those greedy eyes that saw her as his possession. Even if you are her superior, I need to confirm her safety as her big brother. Syria gathered his aura. He apparently decided to force his way through because he realized he couldn't win the argument.
You are revealing your true nature. Raon put his hand on Heavenly Drive's hilt.
He rotated the ring of fire and controlled the 10,000 flames cultivation so that he could draw his sword at any moment.
Rumble.
Syria also looked like he had no intention of withdrawing as he raised his chin, touching the grip of the greatsword on his back. The light was gone from his eyes. He was the same emotionless monster that he'd seen before.
You can't win in your current state. Wrath popped out from the bracelet and frowned. Give your body to the King of Essence.
The pervert who is trying to hurt the King of Essence's maid shall be frozen whole. He was apparently feeling bad about Renan, who he cherished, since he kept shaking his sleeve to urge him to give him Raon's body.
Silence. I need to focus. Raon ignored wrath and caught his breath. I know I'll lose.
Syria was already a fully fledged master when he met him last time. Since he must have climbed at least another level during the last few years, it was pretty much impossible for him to win.
That's why I'm asking you to withdraw. You sometimes have to fight even if you know you will lose.
Since Runan was behind him, he couldn't step away. He needed to show her that Syria could be overcome, since she was still trembling from the trauma.
Are you still stopping me? You must have done something to my sister.
Syria was still minding other people's gazes in that situation. He really was a crazy bastard. Considering the fact that you are still trying to approach your sister when she doesn't want it, I'm sure you must have done something to her.
For example, you might have threatened her with something? Like blood, perhaps? Raon Sighart.
Raon attacked back, and Syria's face became even colder. He grasped the hilt, nothing but murderous intent in his eyes.
Rumble.
As Raon and Syria were about to draw their swords, an even more overwhelming energy wave exploded up from next to them.
Stop right there.
Cheryl was approaching them with eyes as cold as the northern wind.
How dare you show off your strength here? She glared at Raon and Syria's pathetic behavior with a frown.
Heavenly Blade Division Leader.
Long time, no see.
Syria instantly suppressed his energy wave and smiled.
I didn't notice because you were too silent. I don't think so.
Cheryl snorted at Syria's words.
What's the matter? What even happened to start a fight in someone else's house? It's not a big deal.
I just wanted to see my sister, but the Light Winds Vice Squad leader was stopping me.
I simply declined the request because we are currently on a mission.
Raon explained to Cheryl what happened.
I guess both sides make sense, at least. Cheryl looked at Raon and Syria one after the other before she nodded.
She should have sent Syria back in that situation, but she was incapable of reading the atmosphere.
If you are both unwilling to withdraw, then you should have a sword duel. She nodded, then raised a finger. Sword duel? Both Raon and Syria's eyes widened in surprise.
Since we are at someone else's house, let's make it a small sword duel that ends in a single strike.
Single strike means the winner will be decided in a single strike.
Cheryl tapped her scabbard while smiling faintly. If you win, you will get some time to talk with Renan, and you will withdraw if Raon wins.
How about it? That sounds good. However, since you are on different levels, you are forbidden from using astral energy. I accept. Syria nodded in satisfaction.
Heavenly Blade Leader, I.
Do it.
As Raon was about to tell her he didn't want to make a bet with the frightened Renan on the line, Cheryl's aura message could be heard.
Syria is one of the most talented swordsmen in the entire continent.
Even though the match will end in a single strike, it will be extremely helpful for your growth.
Show me what you can do with all the lessons I gave you so far, and all the training you did every night. Raon's lips parted upon hearing that. Did she do all that for me in this situation?
When his mouth was opening in surprise, she continued.
Don't worry about Runan.
I'll never give her to him, even if you lose.
Cheryl's eyes sparkled as she took a glance at her.
She wasn't actually unable to read the atmosphere, she just created that situation while having noticed everything.
I'll do it.
Raon nodded, then turned to look back at Runan.
Runan. MHM.
Runan raised her head for the first time.
Watch what I do.
Raon spoke, before stepping forward.
What a show-off. Shut up. Because he said all that, he couldn't lose anymore. He needed to show Runan that Syria wasn't an unbreakable wall. A single strike match. How interesting.
Syria unsheathed the greatsword from his back with a smile.
The energy emanating from the jet black blade was so powerful that it felt suffocating. Ha!
Raon caught his breath and raised Heavenly Drive. Pure energy was storming above the white blade, contrasting with the greatsword's color.
Ready. Yes. Yes. At Cheryl's signal, Raon lowered his posture and pulled his sword back.
He took the flame dragon arts posture, and a small light sparkled from Syria's eyes. I knew he would know this technique. Considering Syria's personality, he must have investigated Raon while he was checking on Runan. It was plain obvious that he would know about the flame dragon art he had used to defeat Garen.
Sure-ish.
Syria very slightly turned his ankle and pulled his greatsword a bit more to the side.
Quick sword.
He must have been planning to deflect the flame dragon art before it could gain momentum by adding speed into the greatsword's power.
Begin.
As soon as Cheryl finished speaking, Syria's greatsword pounced at him.
The jet black blade pierced into the space and a tremendous amount of energy exploded. Just as I expected. He could ascertain that Syria was trying to interrupt the flame dragon art with power and speed before it could show its true abilities. However, Syria's strike was overflowing with wisdom, despite being a simple slash. It almost looked like it was an extremely polished strike.
Taking it on with a sloppy strike would break Heavenly Drive and give him a fatal injury.
There's no reason to use a weapon he has already analyzed. Raon poured all his energy into Heavenly Drive as he thrusted it.
A powerful flame was engulfing the blade, but the shape wasn't that of fierce dragon, it was a heavy mountain instead. Heavy sword. It was the heavy sword he got the hint of from Garen, then later understood through Cheryl's lessons.
Rumble.
Heavenly Drive was imbued with the principles that he'd mixed on his own and created a thick line. The glimmering crimson light on the blade turned into a heavy tidal wave and flooded the atmosphere. Whir! Raon's heavy blade advanced while dominating the sky, clashing against Syria's greatsword.
Bomb!
With an earth-shattering sound, a tremendous shockwave stormed through the surrounding area.
Kring!
Syria's greatsword was still emanating a huge amount of power without being pushed back by the shockwave, but its sword resonance sounded like it was screaming once it was blocked by Heavenly Drive, which was advancing while burning up the aura.
How is this? Astonishment was reflected in Syria's dim pupils.
His reaction revealed that he never thought his sword would be stopped.
Ha!
Raon narrowed his eyes while maintaining the heaviness in Heavenly Drive's blade. This was the correct answer. Using a new heavy sword against Syria, who knew about the flame dragon art, was a game changer. Not losing the bet was a great achievement, but his understanding of the heavy sword became incomparable to before thanks to that single clash.
Cheryl silently groaned while watching the greatsword and Heavenly Drive's competition. A draw?
She was planning to make Syria withdraw by mentioning their ages and experience after Raon showed some skill.
She didn't even imagine he would manage to end the match in a draw. Even though Syria didn't use astral energy, he's still one of the 12 stars of the continent.
Although he fought with a disadvantage, it was ridiculous that he managed to achieve equality in a single strike match.
Cheryl couldn't even keep her face straight. Creak!
She came back to her senses upon hearing the sword resonance coming from the clash and snapped her fingers.
The match is over.
She shot her aura to separate them.
Since your attack was stopped midway, it's a draw. And no. There is no reason to say no.
This match was about a single strike.
Since you've been stopped, it is a draw. Coup. Syria looked completely irritated for the first time as he bit his lip. No one came out victorious, but it's obvious that Raon lacks experience and ability. This match is Raon's victory.
Cheryl shook her hand while stating the line she had prepared.
Syria glared at Raon fiercely without responding.
The emotion in his gaze was crystal clear.
Syria, step back.
You lost.
Heavenly Division Leader. If you have complaints, I'll be your opponent.
Cheryl crossed her arms and blocked Syria's path. She was small, but the energy wave emanating from her overwhelmed Syria and soared to reach the end of the sky.
All right. I have no choice since I cannot currently win against you, Raon. I lost. Your sword was amazing. Syria really was an outstanding guy.
He managed to regain his composure and smiled despite what happened.
Runan, I'll return later since it looks like you aren't doing too well today.
You should share this with your companions.
He smiled gently and extended the hand holding the ice cream box.
It could be called amazing that he was still pretending to be a kind older brother.
She doesn't need th.
I'll tell him. As Raon was about to refuse, Runan stepped forward.
Runan? Runan watched the entire situation from behind Raon's back.
She wanted to tell Syria to leave herself, but she couldn't move her body because she remembered Syria's voice telling her that he would kill everyone. Even though it was her business, she entrusted everything to Raon and hoped that Syria would disappear while covering her ears.
When all sound became an unrecognizable ringing in her ears, Raon turned around and opened his mouth. Watch me properly.
Although she had covered her ears, she could hear him perfectly. She raised her head for the first time.
Rumble.
The tremendous energy exploding from Syria's greatsword looked like the sky itself. Runan screamed upon seeing the strike that could split apart everything in the world.
Dodge. However, Raon didn't withdraw and slowly thrust his sword.
The flame on his blade was extended like a wall, encroaching on the space.
Clank.
Although Syria's greatsword looked like it could even split the ocean apart, it couldn't overcome Heavenly Drive's thin blade and let out a strange groan once it was stopped in the middle.
Ah! Runan exclaimed with trembling lips. He blocked it. Syria was a matchless existence in her head, someone that no one was able to stop.
Once his sword was stopped by Raon, the jet-black rain clouds filling her head fell with red rain.
He wasn't unstoppable. Syria wasn't invincible.
His voice, which used to resound in her head, and his presence that used to cover the entire sky, started to decrease little by little. Shatter. She felt refreshed, as if she had been freed from the shackles binding her hands and feet. Raon. Released from her shackles, Raon turned around and smiled faintly while looking at Raon's eyes, which widened in surprise. If Syria taught her death for the first time, Raon taught her about unbreakable will for the first time. He taught her that Syria could be overcome. He would be more than a lifelong benefactor. Thank you. She expressed her gratitude, then took a step towards Syria, looking straight at him. I'm scared. She was still scared. She wanted to avert her eyes. However, she was able to face him because of Raon's warm energy behind her. I don't have anything to talk about with you, big brother. Raon raised her head while biting her lip. A small amount of confidence was sprouting in her purple eyes, surrounded by sunlight. Don't come to me until I visit you. Her voice was trembling, but she told Syria what she wanted to say for the first time. Raon. The mask covering Syria's face shattered into pieces for the first time. Chapter 209. Raon swallowed nervously while looking at Syria. Is that his true face? Apparently, Syria's anger and emotionless facade were also an act, since his face after his mask had shattered was twisted in a grotesque manner. He didn't even look like a human being anymore, resembling a beast straight from the wilderness. And a starving beast on top of that. There was no trace of reason in his glowing purple eyes. There was only ferocity and desire, raging like a fire. He might start attacking us. Raon fixed his grip on Heavenly Drive. He couldn't predict his actions, since it was his first time seeing him in that state. He needed to be prepared, since he could start attacking Raon or himself. Cheryl came up next to them and narrowed her eyes. She apparently thought the same. Raon. Syria called Raon with a much more affectionate voice than usual. What did you say just now? He looked down on Raon with a strange posture, his waist pulled back and his upper body leaning forward. A gloomy energy was emerging from above his shoulders. I told you to not come. Raon didn't withdraw, facing Syria's creepy eyes. I'm going to stop you, big brother. I'm not going to stand still and do nothing like before. She finished what she wanted to tell him even though her hands, gathered in front of her chest, were trembling. Ha! White steam came out of Syria's mouth. You will stop me? Stop me, huh? Ah! Raon's legs faltered in the face of that extremely ominous energy. Good job on saying it. Raon came up next to Raon and held her shoulder. He raised Heavenly Drive to mid-height in order to react to any situation. Raon. Ahu, my little sister. Syria didn't even take a glance at Raon, opening his mouth widely while staring at Raon. When did you start making those eyes towards me? Why are you looking at me with those cold eyes? He extended his wide-open hand, laughing in a strange manner. Scram! Raon fended off Syria's approach with the fangs of insanity. Clang! Syria blocked the blow by holding his greatsword in a reverse grip, but he was pushed back to his original position. Raon, how could my Raon look at me like that? Ah! The winner told you to leave. When Syria started running towards them once again, Cheryl made her move. She lightly kicked the ground to advance, extending her right fist. Slum! A gray light sparkled, and Syria bounced away like a rubber ball, without even having time to defend himself before he was slammed into the ground. It was difficult to believe that such power came from a simple punch, without any preparatory movement. It was fast and powerful. Cheryl's punch was fast, powerful, and precise at the same time. The ability to harmonize all different principles in a punch in such a short time was indeed the skills of a grandmaster. Coup! Blood was flowing from Syria's mouth from the damage, and Raon was watching him with her lips tightly closed. There's no place for the loser here. You shall disappear, as you promised. Raon coldly looked at him and pointed his sword. Raon, the same blood flows in our veins. Syria stood up while faltering and looked down on Raon. You can't run away, nor escape from this blood. He grinned, drenching his lips with the blood flowing from his mouth. Ah!
Runan's eyes were trembling violently.
Fear was emerging inside her, just like before she overcame her fear of blood.
Aye. She can. Raon narrowed his eyes, standing next to Runan. She can run away, escape, and even beat you up. Raon Zighart.
Syria's gaze was directed at Raon for the first time.
Watch him properly. He's just a human being who can spill blood. You don't need to be afraid.
You can defeat him in the future with your own sword.
Do you really believe that's possible? I'll make it possible. You? Syria's chin was trembling at hearing the serious resolution in Raon's voice. Raon.
Runan clenched her hand, which was no longer trembling, into a fist.
She looked at Raon instead of Syria. Runan. Where are you looking? Look at me. Don't look at him, and look at me instead. I told you to scram.
When Syria came running at Runan in order to return her gaze to him, Raon ignited the 10,000 flames cultivation.
Slam! Heavenly Drive's burning blade fended off Syria's greatsword once again. Ku!
Syria groaned after being pushed back, his greatsword slamming into the ground.
You are getting in my way until the end. Syria Sullian.
As Syria was about to approach with the intention to kill, a tremendous energy wave exploded like an eruption from the right.
I'll cut you if you take one more step forward.
Cheryl stood in front of Syria, her hand on the sword behind her.
Keep your promise.
The deadly coldness flowing from her eyes showed that she was serious about what she said.
You should disappear since you lost. There's no place for you here. Raon also blared at Syria, using the 10,000 flames cultivation to the extreme. Fine. Syria grinned while looking at Raon and Runan.
His eyes were also laughing for the first time, but his face looked like a devil's smile instead of a human's.
Coo-hoo-hoo.
He giggled for a long time with his head lowered before straightening his back.
You should. It's true that I have to leave now, since I lost.
As Raon was about to force him to leave, Syria raised his head. He managed to replace his thick mask in that short time period and was now making a fake smile.
I'll leave as promised. Runan, I wish you good luck in war. We don't need good luck from you. Raon shook his hand. Ha! Syria snickered, then turned around.
He even said goodbye to the warriors of House Yonan and left, as if he had no lingering attachment.
Ah! Runan finally sank on her knees and exhaled heavily. Good job on enduring it. Raon patted Runan's shoulder with a smile. MHM.
Runan nodded weakly, but her eyes were brighter than ever.
Is that the Azure Sword's true nature?
Cheryl narrowed his eyes, looking at Syria's back. I did think he was hiding a lot behind his back, but he's a lot more serious than I thought.
He's pretty much a madman at this point. She exclaimed while helping Runan stand as she caught her breath. I know, right? Anyway, good job.
She must have plucked up the courage thanks to you, as well. Cheryl smiled while tapping his back to praise him. It was Raon's first time seeing her smile, but her smile looked kind rather than refreshing.
He's not an average madman. Wrath wrinkled his nose. He's a completely perverted whack.
If the King of Essence had a body, he would have been frozen already just to get his limbs torn into pieces. He regrettably shook his clenched fist.
Even in Devildom, there aren't many demons like him. How could a human be so crazy? Are there more things like that? One of them is even a demon king. Wrath shuddered. It looked like he didn't even want to think about it. Demon king, huh? Stop thinking about useless things and look at the ice cream girl.
As Raon was about to ask again, Wrath hung on his shoulder.
What? The ice cream girl is suffering right now.
You should comfort her already. But she managed to stand up on her own.
Shouldn't I be complimenting her instead of comforting her?
No, she's currently going through a hard time, so she needs to be comforted by something extremely delicious.
Delicious? Go to the Beat ice cream shop right now and buy an ice cream for the girl.
That's the best way to comfort her. Wrath violently swayed his arms, urging him to do it.
It's not to comfort her. You just want to eat it. Raon sighed. That's slightly, very slightly, true, but the King of Essence is doing it for her sake. You feel better when you eat sweet stuff, so the depression should disappear. When Raon thought about it, he remembered Helen mentioning that eating sweet food made you feel better. Let's go. Raon went to Runan and extended his hand. Where? Runan raised her head, her eyes once more blank. We don't need to cancel our plans just because of him. Ah. Come with us, Heavenly Blade Leader. I'll buy. Raon looked at Cheryl after making Runan stand. Me, too? Probably because it was a hot region, the beet ice cream shop in Dembel City was a lot bigger than the one in Kainloon. Dozens of different beet ice creams were filling the cabinet on the other side of the glass window, and ice cream desserts were also displayed in a line. There's a lot. It's big. Runan's eyes were wide, looking all around and examining the ice cream on the other side of the glass. They all look pretty good. Cheryl was also examining the ice cream desserts while sticking right next to the glass window. Considering the fact that she always ate at least a small chocolate after a meal, she must have loved desserts like them. Coo. Rath sniffled while looking at Runan's back. I'm proud of her. I'm so proud of her. What? The ice cream girl broke the shell on her own and came out. I'm so proud of her that I want to pat her shoulder. He nodded, with teary blue eyes. The King of Essence wanted to devour that perverted bastard alive, but your choice of letting the beet ice cream girl overcome it by herself was the correct one. I'm so relieved. Rath was looking at Runan warmly, saying that he was proud of her. Raon licked his lips. Is he really a demon king? Except for his doormat nature that he showed sometimes, or rather, often, he felt more like a busybody middle-aged man or woman. When I look at the ice cream girl standing on her 2 feet, I'm satisfied without even eating. Then let's skip your ice cream. Shut up. Rath flapped his hands, telling him to stop kidding. The King of Essence is hungry. Go right now and order every single ice cream in this shop. I knew you wanted to come here because you were hungry. That's not true, the King of Essence. As Rath was stubbornly trying to refute his words, the messages appeared. You've achieved equality against an opponent with an overwhelming difference. All stats have increased by 6. Your heavy swords proficiency has increased significantly. The message was telling him that all of his stats and the heavy swords proficiency had improved thanks to fighting equally against Syria, who was a lot stronger than him. 6 whole points? Considering it gave 6 whole points despite just being facing him on equal footing, Syria must have been really strong. Raon was still feeling a bit bitter, but reading the message made all his irritation disappear. You. On the other hand, Rath, who was excited about eating the ice cream, widened his eyes to a point where they could pop out. This stupid system. Why are you giving him stats when that pervert bastard had a handicap? This is an unreasonable reward. Rath ground his teeth, arguing that he shouldn't get stats since Syria had a handicap and it was just a draw. It's because I overcame a disadvantageous fight. Raon snickered. Even though Syria couldn't use the best of his abilities, he was still at a huge disadvantage. Since the victory was achieved through strategy and instantaneous judgment, it wasn't strange to receive so many rewards. HNNG. I lost my appetite. Rath briskly turned his head to express his displeasure. What are you going to eat, Raon? Runan, who was still choosing the ice cream after having already picked 10 of them, turned around and shouted. I'll skip them since you said you don't have an appetite, alright? Ha! 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 Raon shook his hand at Rath and looked at Runan. Ah, I lost my appetite. Mint chocolate. Rath screeched, despite having said he lost appetite. Tell her you want mint chocolate. But your appetite. Mint chocolate. Dembel City. Northern Castle Wall. Syria Sullian's fervent eyes were shaking as he watched Runan and Raon exit the ice cream shop. Sir Syria. A man covering his whole body with a white robe came up to him and bowed. The others have already arrived in the vicinity. You need to leave now. Do I really need to go? Since there's an item we need to get from him,
we need to make sure to finish him off this time. The robed man narrowed his eyes while looking at Raon and Raon. Although the white blood religion is going to kill him anyway, I'll devise a plan to dispose of Raon Sieghart if you tell me to.
No.
Syria slowly shook his head.
Let him be. I saw something great today. What would that be?
The robed man raised his head slightly. The madness in Syria's voice was overflowing and he sounded completely different from usual.
Raon, I didn't expect her to show those eyes.
They were beautiful. Chills ran down my spine the moment I saw myself reflected in her transparent purple eyes.
Syria grinned, tearing at his left arm to the point that it bled.
Those eyes, that face of hers when she looked at me.
Ah, it was great. Sir Syria? The robed man swallowed nervously. You know, I thought an apple needed to be grown inside a glass bottle.
I believed that it needed to be raised with extreme care, so that no pests nor rain could touch it. Syria continued his strange story while licking his lips.
But I was wrong. It's brimming with vitality from receiving real sunlight outside of the bottle and fighting pests. My heart is trembling from just looking at it. That's why.
He turned around and covered the robed man's mouth.
Don't even think about touching those pests. Get it? Yes. Yes. The robed man just nodded, unable to think at all.
He'd been with Syria for over 10 years now, but it was the first time he was spreading so much madness.
The faster Raon grows, the more beneficial it is for me. Because that girl will be mine in the end.
Syria smiled like a Cheshire cat while watching the tiny smile on Ranon's face as she ate the ice cream. Once Raon left his vision, the madness coming from Syria slowly subsided.
Ha!
He caught his breath and slowly turned around. The monstrous man from before, who couldn't hide his excitement, was now gone, and he had returned to being the azure sword Syria Sullian, praised by the world.
Let's go.
Syria shook the dust off his clothes with a refreshing smile. I should block his path at least, in order to ingratiate myself with those seniors.
The next day, Raon looked up to the four-horse carriage parked at the main entrance of House Yonan. It's amazing.
The harmony between straight and curved lines created a beautiful outside appearance. A shock-absorbing device was installed inside to reduce the shaking, and its durability was even better than steel. He heard it was personally made by the head of house, Michelle Yonan, and judging from its outer appearance and the interior, it seemed to be the only carriage in the world made for Enchia. It looked even more beautiful, because he could feel her love towards her daughter.
Wow! The carriage is awesome.
As expected of House Yonan. Dorian fidgeted with his fingers while looking at the carriage. It looked like he would put it in his belly pocket if no one was watching.
Raon, is it really okay for us to accept this? Baen pointed at the round necklace hanging under his neck.
An evade poison artifact of this degree is a priceless item.
I agree, it's a bit too expensive.
Martha and Crine also narrowed their eyes while looking at their evade poison artifacts.
We just need to return them after using them. Don't worry about it. Raon shook his hand with a smile. Those items needed to be returned anyway.
The real rewards were the ones they were going to obtain once the mission was over.
Prepare to depart. Cheryl and Michelle were coming down from the building inside the house while supporting Enchia.
Enchia's expression was slightly brighter than before from completely accepting the reality of the situation.
Yes. Understood.
Light Wind and Heavenly Blade answered loud and clear, before examining the carriage and mounting their horses.
Are you okay? Raon went to Enchia and examined her condition. Yes, I'm okay now.
She responded ambiguously while smiling faintly. If you ever have a problem, please tell us immediately.
Thank you. You are freaking handsome today as well.
Enchia started staring at Raon's face even though she was about to enter the carriage.
Stop it already. You silly girl. Ah, Mom. Let me look at Sir Raon's face a little bit longer. Do it later.
Michelle frowned, personally pushing Enchia in the carriage.
Raon smiled faintly while watching the quarrel between mother and daughter.
It was a relief that they looked like they managed to overcome the betrayal of someone who was pretty much their family.
We are finally getting started.
Raon grasped the necklace Michelle gave him while looking at the blue sky that seemed to be a good omen for their safe return.
I'm fully prepared. Come at me, Robert Dogs. We will stay here for tonight.
Cheryl dismounted from her horse and pointed at the open area located on the forest's outskirts. It wasn't a wide area, but it was a decent place to spend a night.
Prepare to camp. Yes. Following her order, the Heavenly Blade swordsman casually scattered away. Whom?
Enchia left the carriage, narrowing her eyes. It's because she saw the busy Heavenly Blade and the Light Wind slowly preparing for their training.
What a curious sight. I thought the Heavenly Blade people were the seniors. They are indeed seniors. They are far more experienced than us.
Dorian smiled while walking up to Enchia.
What? But why are the Heavenly Blade people the only ones to work? Ah, there's a really interesting story behind this.
Actually, our vice squad leader.
He told her about the arm wrestling incident that happened before. Wow, he's handsome and smart, and strong as well?
Enchia's eyes looked completely impressed as she stared at Raon with her hands gathered together.
You are complimenting me too much. It's not too much. You are so damn handsome.
It was mysterious that she only used slang whenever she called him handsome. She was a mysterious person in many ways.
Is your body all right? Yes. I'm feeling a lot better than when I was at home.
Enchia smiled, showing her forearm, where the heat had decreased.
That's a relief. I'm going to quickly check the surroundings before I come back. Raon turned around and called the Light Wind. Don't play around, do your guard duty properly. Don't worry about it. MHM. Don't you trust me? Affirmative.
Hearing the responses that were so full of personality, Raon went to the deeper part of the forest. He looked around for about 30 minutes to see if there was anything dangerous, but he couldn't find any bandits nor monsters since it was an area close to Dembel City. I should swing my sword a little before returning. Since Cheryl and Ekin were at camp, he figured it was okay to warm himself up before returning.
Do you never get tired of it? Wrath frowned, unable to understand him. Tired of it? But it's fun for me.
Since he could never experience the feeling of getting better and progressing in his previous life, there was no way it wouldn't be fun. Raon pushed away Wrath, who kept complaining, and drew Heavenly Drive.
Let's start with the heavy sword.
The feeling of the heavy sword that pushed Syria back was still vivid in his head.
He raised his sword in order to feel that sensation once again. Heavy, it needs to be heavier than anything. He swung his sword, incorporating the 10,000 Flames cultivation's energy into Heavenly Drive's blade. Rumble.
The powerful pressure spreading from the thin blade collapsed the land that he didn't even touch.
It's still not enough. Probably because he became more proficient in the heavy sword, or because he wasn't in an actual battle, he felt like something was amiss. However, he couldn't tell what he was missing. Step. As he raised his sword again to strike, small footsteps could be heard.
Since they were familiar steps, he calmly turned his head around.
Are you training? Cheryl was approaching him with indifferent eyes. Yes. Raon nodded, then lowered Heavenly Drive. I'd like to find the feeling I had during the fight against Syria. That wasn't too bad. Cheryl nonchalantly nodded.
But it couldn't exactly be called mid-level.
I know. However, are you not sure what exactly you are lacking? Indeed. Then I'll teach you what you are lacking.
The light of aura was reflected in Cheryl's calm eyes.
Raise your sword. Chapter 210. North Grave Mountain. Midpoint.
Rimmer was licking his lips while leaning his back against a long boulder that looked like a leaf laid on the ground horizontally.
My lord. He raised his head to look at the top of the boulder. Why did you entrust Raon to that inflexible woman? Glenn didn't respond, instead he just stared at the annex building, where faint light was emerging from the darkness. What are you going to do if Raon learns to be as strict as Cheryl? Rimmer's hand was trembling, terrified by that possibility.
He's already meticulous as he is right now, and if he takes after Cheryl on top of that.
I don't even want to think about it.
He shook his head, telling him that shouldn't be allowed to happen. That boy was trying to create his own swordsmanship.
Glenn opened his mouth, slowly looking up. Yes. He's currently researching the heavy sword. Rimmer nodded, thinking about the way Raon was practicing the heavy sword.
The Heavenly Blade leader has trained all different swords' properties to the extreme.
She's the most helpful person for him right now.
Glenn nonchalantly explained the reason he entrusted Raon to Cheryl. So, you were taking care of Raon once again. You are really a grandson's grandfather, since you even moved the Heavenly Blade in order to teach him.
Silence. If you like Raon so much, and want to take care of him, you should just say it. Or you should at least personally take care of him. It feels so frustrating to watch. Rimmer slammed his chest. Head of house, you might end up dying without even telling him your feelings a single time. You know, people at our age can die at any time. I guess you get sores in your mouth if you don't get beaten at least once a month. Huff. Crimson sparks appeared in Glenn's hand, and Rimmer shut his mouth tightly. However, it looked like he couldn't bear the silence, since he opened his mouth again in less than 10 seconds. It's okay that you did it for Raon's sake, but you made a mistake this time. Mistake? There's no way that inflexible woman would teach him swordsmanship. Rimmer frowned intensely. She will teach him properly once she starts, but I don't think that's going to happen. Cheryl was the strictest person in Sieghart. There was no way she would easily decide to teach Raon. Raon is amazing in many ways, but he's going to need at least 10 missions with her in order to open her mind. Rimmer swayed his arms in circles. It's better to open the library and show him various books on swordsmanship than to wait for that to happen. Although he acknowledged Raon's abilities, he couldn't imagine Raon overcoming Cheryl's strictness. What do you think will happen if Cheryl teaches swordsmanship to Raon? It will be extremely helpful for him if she does teach him. Rimmer continued while scratching his chin. She does teach properly, since she is such a strict person. I'm sure that will allow him to grow a lot. If Cheryl decided to teach him, she would keep teaching him until he realized the true meaning. In that case, his proficiency was bound to reach a different level by the time he returned. Then there's nothing to worry about. Glenn took out an opened letter from his inner pocket. Because the Heavenly Blade leader is currently teaching not only Raon, but also the other children. What? Rimmer's jaw dropped. And no way. How did that even happen? She was tricked by Raon. Tricked? That Cheryl was? Yes. Huh? Rimmer's lips were trembling. He never imagined that Cheryl could be tricked by Raon's plans, despite her meticulous personality. He really was an amazing guy. She said she would properly teach Raon the heavy sword. He's going to grow up a lot by the time he returns. Glenn smiled faintly, enjoying Rimmer's surprised reaction. I'm looking forward to it a little. Raon narrowed his eyes while looking at Cheryl, who stopped in front of him. Did you run away again because you didn't want to cook? What are you saying right now? Cheryl was quickly blinking her eyes in panic. You also ran away when we were coming to House Yonin because you messed up the cooking multiple times. It was mysterious that cooking was the one thing Cheryl was bad at, even though she was good at everything else. It was truly a mystery that her food tasted like mud, when mud wasn't even one of the ingredients. That was terrible. Wrath sighed. Even the Demon King of Veracity surrendered to Cheryl's food, labeling it not made for humans. That did happen back then, but that's not the case this time. She violently shook her head, telling him that he was mistaken. Then why did you suddenly decide to come here? I told you I would teach you the heavy sword. Cheryl's voice was weak, probably because she realized the situation was already unfolding differently from what she wanted. I properly see it through once I start something. I didn't finish my lesson about the heavy sword. She narrowed her eyes while pointing at Heavenly Drive. There's a huge weakness in your heavy sword right now. I came here to teach you about that, not because of the food. It's true. Okay. Raon awkwardly nodded. Judging from the way she emphasized it, the cooking must have been part of the reason. I have a question before I teach you the heavy sword. Please go ahead. Why are you trying to create a new swordsmanship instead of learning an existing one?
Cheryl was apparently aware that he was trying to create a new swordsmanship through the principles of the heavy sword.
Can you answer? I can, since it's not a big deal. Raon nodded nonchalantly.
I kept training the star connecting sword, even after I learned advanced swordsmanship. I was just trying to warm up and remind myself of the basics, but the swordsmanship started to transform to match my tendencies at some point.
Transform?
The star connecting sword is originally more focused on defense than offense, but the one I've been using is more focused on offense.
The swordsmanship has evolved to match my personality and aura.
He was enlightened after he reached the highest level of expert and created Frostpond. He was capable of changing his swordsmanship's flow itself once he learned it to the extreme. However, it was still lacking compared to the swordsmanship I had created myself, despite all the changes. Just as custom clothes feel more comfortable than ready-made clothes, the swordsmanship I created myself was more powerful and reactive, with more possibilities for progress.
I see. It should suit you better than any other swordsmanship, since you can use it the way you want to. However, it's an extremely difficult path. Cheryl nonchalantly looked at Heavenly Drive.
Creating a new swordsmanship is a matter of enlightenment. The door might not open, even if you learn countless swordsmanship styles and increase their proficiencies.
I don't mind it. What?
Even if I don't manage to create a new swordsmanship, I'm already enjoying training and getting stronger.
Raon smiled. He wasn't lying.
Just like he told Wrath, the joy of progressing and getting better was bringing him more happiness than any other emotion.
I see. So that was why.
Cheryl nodded with a faint smile on her face.
He really isn't an ordinary guy. His response was brimming with wisdom.
She was wondering how he got the temperament of a young founder, and it was because his willpower and his soul level were completely different from ordinary people.
That's pretty good.
His confident and lenient answer was pretty good, but the fact that he practiced the basic swordsmanship star connecting sword to the extreme was even better.
Did that answer your question?
Raon slightly lowered his chin while looking at Cheryl as she indulged in her thoughts.
Yes, it did. Although he didn't say anything special, Cheryl seemed satisfied, since a graceful smile had appeared around her mouth. Since I heard your answer, it should be my turn now.
Cheryl took her sword from behind her back along with its scabbard.
We will do it the same way as your match against Syria. You shall strike me with the best heavy sword you can currently use.
I'll match my heavy sword to your strength and proficiency in response.
All right.
She was planning to teach him by clashing against him, and Raon preferred that method compared to theory lessons since it felt easier for him.
Come at me.
Cheryl turned her palm face up, bending 4 fingers towards herself in a come at me gesture.
Rumble. Raon raised Heavenly Drive to head's level, gathering the 10,000 flames cultivation to the extreme.
He exploded the energy of the raging fire dashing through his mana circuit at Cheryl.
Slum.
He swung Heavenly Drive down in one fell swoop, incorporating heaviness.
His image was a mountain. The blade was engulfed by the weight of the North Grave Mountain, which surrounded the entirety of Sieghart. Is that all?
Cheryl swung her scabbard upward with cold light reflected in her eyes.
Rumble.
The huge power exploding out of it looked like a sudden tidal wave emerging from a peaceful ocean, and that power clashed against Heavenly Drive.
Bomb!
The terrifying shockwave emerging from the clash between Heavenly Drive and Cheryl's scabbard created fissures on the land in the shape of a spiderweb.
Coup!
Raon grit his teeth, while looking at Cheryl's scabbard, which was emanating a fearsome amount of power.
I'm getting pushed back.
Although he was definitely using a similar amount of aura and heaviness as her, he was being pushed back one-sidedly, as if he were trying to block steel with a tree branch.
TSSH. Unable to overcome the tremendous weight in Cheryl's scabbard, he had to take 5 whole steps back. How? He couldn't understand. Just like she promised, Cheryl was only using the same amount of aura and heavy sword principles as him, but he got pushed back way too easily, as if he were a kid competing against an adult. Moreover, I had the upper hand.
In a clash between a downward swing and an upward swing of a heavy sword, the downward swing obviously had the advantage. He couldn't understand how he was still pushed back despite that fact.
Can I try it again?
Of course. Cheryl nodded, nodded, lowering her scabbard. She was telling him to swing down once again.
Ha! Raon resonated the ring of fire and swirled the 10,000 flames cultivation.
He maximized his focus as if he were in a fight of life and death, then kicked the ground.
Whir!
The crimson flame created on Heavenly Drive's blade harmonized with the heaviness to generate a tremendous amount of pressure. The heaviness that used to stay on the blade now engulfed the space as it rushed towards Cheryl.
I need to properly watch it.
While attacking with everything he had, Raon focused entirely on Cheryl's sword.
Kring!
The gray aura spreading like heat haze on the scabbard dominated the space a lot faster than him and sword.
The sword wasn't the only one.
The heaviness of her strike didn't simply come from the blade. Even the strands of aura spreading on the scabbard incorporated the principles of heavy sword.
Slum!
Heavenly Drive and the scabbard clashed once again, and Raon was bounced back like a rubber ball.
He knelt on the ground. I finally understood.
Raon raised himself while exhaling roughly.
How to incorporate heaviness. I've only been incorporating heaviness in the blade.
I dominated the space with the heaviness on the blade, just like a fish following the flow of water.
However, the Heavenly Blade leader's strike was different.
He pointed at her scabbard, then continued. The heaviness wasn't only on the blade, but also in the strands of aura spreading around the blade. That's why it could dominate the space faster and wider, resulting in my loss. That was the reason he was pushed back despite using the same aura and principles of the heavy sword. She had incorporated heaviness into the aura spreading from the blade on top of the blade itself.
Correct. Cheryl nodded with a smile. The heaviness only remained on your blade.
Even though it's still powerful, thanks to your aura and your physical strength, it can only swallow a narrow amount of space.
You are right.
However, if you incorporate aura on the spreading aura on top of the blade, the power, speed, and range will be doubled.
And
she raised her scabbard for the first time. The gray energy gathered and merged on top of the scabbard, forming perfectly materialized astral energy.
Wham!
Although she was just standing still, an outrageous amount of pressure spread out from her. Raon felt like his entire body was being crushed despite using the 10,000 flames cultivation, as if the heavy sword she'd shown during her previous lesson was mere child's play.
Rumble! It wasn't just him.
The entire open space was getting crushed. The whole space was pretty much in the palm of her hand. Using astral energy in the true heavy sword creates this result. The only people who can fight in this domain are warriors who have reached the same level as me.
Cool.
Don't be too focused on the blade, practice incorporating the sword's properties in your aura and the space.
Just like I mentioned before, the mental image is the hint.
Cheryl removed the astral energy, then put her scabbard behind her back.
Your swordsmanship should be able to advance to the next dimension once you achieve that. And that's...
She stopped speaking for a moment, then looked up to the sky.
One of the ways to achieve sword field creation. Sword field creation.
He unconsciously swallowed at the mention of sword field creation. I thought it would take a long time, but it finished so quickly.
It's not fun to teach you. Cheryl chuckled, then turned around.
She went towards camp as if she had nothing left to do with him.
Thank you.
Raon bowed at Cheryl's back as she left.
She's different from what I thought.
When he saw Cheryl for the first time, he thought she was just a strict swordswoman like the rumors said, but he could see different sides of her from traveling with her.
She was a much more warm-hearted and considerate person than he'd thought. Since I've learned it, I need some practice now.
You should be able to do some sloppy technique like that without even practicing.
Let's go eat instead. I need to practice because I'm not a demon king. What are you talking about?
Your mindset is already that of a fully fledged demon king.
Even the king of essence needs to take after you in some respects. Rat's eyes turned round. It looked like he was serious about that. Is that a compliment or an insult? Raon sighed, then incorporated Heavenly Drive's blade with the principles of heaviness. Not only the blade, but also the aura.
He incorporated the heavy sword's principles in the flames spreading from the blade like a heat haze. However, the flames scattered into the air before they could contain the weight, making it difficult to properly strengthen them.
This is not easy.
There was a reason Cheryl called it a true heavy sword. It was extremely difficult to incorporate the heavy sword's principles in the scattering aura.
This is going to be interesting.
He unconsciously smiled. It was certainly going to be difficult, but he could only smile in anticipation for how his heavy sword would become once he managed to achieve that.
And sword field creation.
He'd been avoiding thinking about it on purpose because he was still too far away from it, but he remembered that name thanks to Cheryl.
I might be able to achieve that.
He swung his sword, filling the silver-white blade with the principles of the heavy sword.
Slum.
Unlike before, the aura on the right side contained heaviness, bursting the ground on the right side and charring it in black.
I'll reach it.
Raon smiled, then raised Heavenly Drive above his head once again.
Wherever it is.
Once Raon returned from his training, the tents were already completed and the meal was ready, the entire camp filled with a mouth-watering fragrance.
That's a nice fragrance. Duck seems to be today's meat.
Roasted duck with butter is bound to be delicious. Listening to Rath's mumbling as he guessed the food from nothing but the scent, he went to Enchia's carriage. A small bonfire was ignited in front of the carriage, and Enchia, Runan, Dorian, and Krine were sitting around it in a circle.
Lady Enchia?
Dorian threw firewood into the bonfire, then waved his hand at Enchia.
I heard you had an excellent eye for beauty. Is that true? It's not that great. I'm just slightly better than others in that aspect. Enchia smiled lightly, telling him it wasn't a big deal. Then can you check me as well? How is my face?
Dorian raised his finger and pointed at his face. Enchia narrowed his eyes and examined Dorian's face from different angles before nodding.
You look cute. Or rather than cute, how about being handsome? You look kind.
She comforted Dorian by describing him with words that were used when she couldn't find anything to compliment.
No, instead of kind, there's that other word.
The thing you tell the vice squad leader all the time. Those clothes look good on you. She smiled, never calling him handsome. She was apparently the type of person who couldn't lie.
Can you check me as well?
Krine swept up his bangs, which were covering his left eye, to the side and stood in front of Enchia. Judging from the way he lowered his voice, he apparently wanted to be called handsome at all costs.
I don't really lose in terms of appearance. You look cool. No, but I'm asking whether I'm handsome or not. You look nice.
Once again, Enchia just smiled without telling Krine what he wanted.
Then, how about Sir Raon's face?
That goes without saying.
He's so damn handsome.
Enchia raised her voice while looking at Raon, who was spectating from behind, as if she'd been waiting for that opportunity.
His hair, skin, nose. Everything's crazy. No, but lots of people told me I'm handsome. He's matchless.
She got angry at him instead, as if she were scolding him about asking that useless question.
Dorian. Yeah.
Krine called out to Dorian, and Dorian slowly nodded as he stood up.
Let's die. Yeah.
They nodded, groaning in sadness with their eyes closed.
Why would you do that when appearance isn't even that important? Raon clicked his tongue while looking at them. Coo. That's going too far.
Dorian and Krine ran into the forest while wiping around their eyes with their sleeves.
You should really be a demon king instead. The journey was smooth.
The road was well paved, there were no monsters nor bandits, and since Enchia was holding out pretty well, it looked like they would be able to arrive at Retran faster than they'd estimated.
We will be at Retran once we cross this forest.
Brace yourselves, since we are going to move without resting. Cheryl pointed at Krun Forest, which was filled with broadleaf trees and grasses as dense as an animal's fur. Since going around would take them an extra 3 days, crossing the forest was the fastest route to Retran.
Enter.
Once she confirmed everyone was ready, she took the lead and entered Krun Forest.
Enter.
Raon and the swordsman repeated after her and followed her. Raon advanced through the forest road while focusing on his aura perception, but he couldn't feel anything yet.
Are they still not coming?
He was looking forward to the Robert bastards, since Krun Forest was the best place for them to attack, yet he could only sense animals and monsters.
I'm sure they won't miss this opportunity though, considering their personalities.
Vice Squad Leader. While he was trying to predict Tima's thoughts, Dorian came up next to him. I heard the war in Retran has been going on for multiple months.
What are they even fighting for?
He asked while scratching his cheek.
It looked like he finally got curious about it.
The other swordsmen also seemed interested, since they secretly looked at them.
What are you even expecting?
Wars don't break out because of important reasons.
What? What else? The reason is usually trivial.
And the same goes for Retran.
Raon continued while looking at the swordsmen, including Dorian.
The houses currently fighting in Retran are Basin and Tryon, and the reason why they are fighting.
What is the reason?
It's because of one child.
Child?
He was sure, since he heard it from Judiel, and confirmed it in Dembel City. There was only one reason for Retran's war, and it was because the two sides wanted to take a young boy with genius talents.
How is that even possible? How can a war even break out just because of one single boy?
The boy was the trigger, but you know how the two houses are sharing Retran between them. He triggered a battle of pride, which aggravated into a war.
Then what happened to that boy? I don't think they are even interested in him anymore. They are just fighting for their pride. A conflict like that was extremely common in the continent.
It was the same in his previous life, where people often fought because of a small portion of land or some item that wasn't even amazing.
The saint must be going through lots of trouble.
Indeed.
Raon started nodding, then narrowed his eyes in the middle.
Whoosh! Once they entered an area where the leaves from the wide-leaved trees became a bit darker, the atmosphere became cooler, and he could feel extremely small presences.
They are here after all.
He was worried they might have given up because they didn't show any signs of movement, but that wasn't the case.
Timas didn't betray his expectations. He went there before them to install formations and have assassins waiting for them. Cheryl and Eakin's eyes were serious.
Apparently, they were already aware of their presences, but were planning to use the situation to teach the light wind.
Rumble. The moment Inshia's carriage passed next to an oak tree with a huge hole, the presences covering the entire forest moved at once. Enemies are here. Prepare for battle.
As soon as Cheryl and Eakin gave the order, the heavenly blade spread out in 4 directions and created a defensive formation. Light wind, create the small sword formation and stay behind the carriage.
Understood.
Bayan understood the situation, taking the swordsman behind the carriage to create a sword formation. No one's going to die if you move according to orders.
Raon encouraged the nervous light wind members, then turned his head. TCHNG.
Looking at the twisted forest as if it had been engulfed by a storm, which was the result of the formation, Raon calmly smiled.
Did you wait for a long time? Just like you've been waiting for me, I've also been waiting for you.